I want to start with a scene. Imagine you met someone. It could be romantic, maybe it was a new friend, maybe it was your therapist or mentor or a colleague who just gets you in a way that feels almost uncanny. And something happens inside you that is really hard to describe. It's not just attraction or admiration, it is more like recognition. Like something in you says, there you are. Like you've been looking for this person without even knowing you're looking. And the feeling is so strong, so specific, that it almost seems like information, like your gut is telling you something true about this person. Here's what I want to explore with you today. What if that feeling is not entirely about them? What if part of what you're recognizing is yourself, a part of yourself you have not been able to hold on to, and you have placed it there into that person for safekeeping? That is what today is about, and I promise you that by the end of this, something is going to make a great deal more sense than it did before. A while back, I made a video about projective identification, specifically about why daughters of narcissistic mothers idealize other people, and also I explained how that connects to this concept from psychoanalytic theory. And the response genuinely surprised me. So many of you said, I finally understand something I've been doing my whole life but could never name. The comments kept returning to the same question, but in different forms. Okay, I understand why I do this, but what does it actually look like in my daily relationships? What does projective identification do to a friendship or a romantic relationship or my relationship with my therapist? What does it feel like from the inside when it's happening? And I kept thinking about how to answer that in a way that is not just more theory, because theory is useful, I am a researcher, but theory is not enough. We need to be able to see this thing in motion, in real relationships and in real time. A quick anchor for anyone who has not seen the first video or who wants a refresher. Projective identification is a concept originally from Melanie Klein, developed further by Wilfred Bion and others in the British object relations tradition. In very simple terms, it is the unconscious process of taking an unbearable part of yourself, a feeling, a need, an identity, maybe quality, and placing it into another person and then relating to it there, in them, rather than in yourself. The word that makes this different from ordinary projection is the second word, identification. It is not just that you have a fantasy about someone. Something actually passes between you. The other person begins to feel the projection landing. They start to act in accordance with what has been placed into them. It is an interpersonal process, not just an internal one. For daughters of narcissistic mothers, this often shows up as idealization. You take your own longing to be special, to be loved unconditionally, to be enough, all these feelings that were never safely held by your mother, and you project them onto another person. They become the one who has all the goodness. They become the answer. It's unconscious, it is not a choice, and it starts very early. Now, what does that do to your actual adult relationships? Let's talk about projective identification in romantic relationships. I want to begin here with a film because I think it will save us 1,000 words. Think about the first Twilight film. Aesthetically, it is a near-perfect depiction of projective identification in romantic form. Bella Swan is, by her own description in the early chapters, someone who does not feel remarkable. She's ordinary, a little clumsy, she does not believe she's worth much. And then she meets Edward, and suddenly he becomes the vessel for everything extraordinary. He's the one who is beautiful, immortal, dangerous in a way that feels like significance. He's the one who sees her as special when no one else does. What is she actually doing psychologically? She is placing her own unlived worth into him and then trying to get close to it by getting close to him. The intensity of that early feeling, the sense that this person is different, that everything before them was just waiting, that is not just love. It is the feeling of your own projected value lighting up in someone else. And here's the twist that nobody in that story ever fully addresses. Edward cannot give Bella what she's actually looking for. Because what she is looking for lives inside her, not in him. No matter how devoted he is, no matter how many times he tells her she is worth saving, she will keep needing more reassurance because the projection keeps needing to be fed. Now let me bring this closer to home with a real pattern. Imagine a woman, let's call her Elena. Elena grew up with a mother who was brilliant, charismatic, and completely unpredictable. Sometimes her mother would look at her with total warmth and see everything in her. And then, without warning, that warmth would have been withdrawn. The mother would become critical, cold, preoccupied with herself, and Elena learned the way children learn these things in their bodies rather than their minds, that love was something that lived in another person and could be taken away. It's not something that she carried in herself. So Elena grows up and falls in love with Marcus. Marcus is confident in a way she's not. He moves through the world like it belongs to him, and she finds this intoxicating, not because confidence is attractive, though it is, but because she has placed her own unlived confidence into him. For a while, Marcus rises to the projection. He acts more confident than he actually feels. He becomes the person she needs him to be. This is the identification part. He has unconsciously received what she placed in him, and he's now carrying it for both of them. And then one evening, Marcus has a hard week. And Elena, who has never consciously done anything wrong, pulls away slightly, feels unsettled, does not quite know why. She suddenly feels less drawn to him. This is the moment. This is the crack in the projection. And here's what I want you to understand about that moment. It feels like he has failed her. But what is actually happening is that she has caught a glimpse of her own fear. The fear that she herself does not have enough confidence, enough worth, enough ground to stand on. For a moment, her projection lost its container and she felt it. In a romantic relationship, projective identification often creates what feels like an incredibly intense early connection. You meet someone and something in you just lights up. They feel significant, different. You feel seen in a way that is almost overwhelming. What is actually happening, at least in part, is that you're placing something into them. Your projection is landing on them, and they may be unconsciously receiving it and starting to act accordingly. That is the interpersonal process. It is not just you having a fantasy. There's a subtle communication happening between two people. So here's the problem. Nobody can carry your projection indefinitely. At some point, they will be human. They will be tired or inconsistent, or they will say something that does not fit the idealized image. And when that happens, the projection cracks. And this can feel absolutely devastating, out of proportion to what actually happened. Because it is not just that they have disappointed you, it is that the part of yourself you placed into them has nowhere to go. The idealized version of you, the lovable one, the worthwhile one, just lost its home. What often follows is devaluation. The person who felt perfect now feels dangerous or withholding or simply less than. That is not you being cruel or unstable, but that is what happens when idealization is not built on a stable foundation. The same splitting that happened with your mother when she was wonderful, then she was frightening, gets reenacted. Not because you are broken, but because you are using the only relational template you had access to when you were forming. So what is worth sitting with? Your partner often feels the projection. They may find themselves acting in ways that surprise them, being more confident than usual, feeling responsible for your sense of worth, or when the projection shifts, suddenly feeling like they can do nothing right, like the ground shifted beneath them, and they do not know why. This process reshapes the other person too. Let's talk about projective identification in female friendships. I want to talk about female friendships specifically because this comes up constantly in the comments, and I think it gets routinely overlooked in favor of romantic dynamics in social media. Romantic love is as if romantic love is the only place that matters. No. So here's the film I keep thinking about for this section, Black Swan. Nina, Natalie Portman's character, is a perfectionist who has spent her life performing the white swan. Controlled, pure, technically precise. Everything she cannot be, everything she fears and hungers for, she projects onto Lily, the new dancer played by Mila Kunis. Lily is free, sensual, careless. Nina watches her the way you watch something you have told yourself you're not allowed to have. And the film does something brilliant that is psychologically super precise. Nina's relationship with Lily oscillates wildly between idealization and paranoia. One moment, Lily is the woman she wants to be. The next, Lily is a threat, a rival who is trying to destroy her, take her role, replace her. The same figure, two completely opposite feelings. That oscillation is splitting in motion. That is projective identification with a female figure. The same push-pull your nervous system learned with your mother. Let me give you a real pattern now. Imagine a woman, let us call her Sophia. Sophia has a close friend, Nadia, who seems to move through life with an ease that Sophia cannot access. Nadia is very social. She does not seem to agonize over what people think of her. She laughs, she takes up space, she's not apologetic. Sophia is drawn to Nadia and she wants to be around her. She also, and this is the part she feels ashamed of, feels a simmering resentment sometimes, like Nadia has something Sophia deserves too, something that was taken from her. She cannot articulate why she feels this way. It does not seem fair to Nadia, who has done nothing wrong. Here's what is actually happening. Sophia has projected her own right to take up space, her own freedom, ease into Nadia. And then she relates to those qualities there in Nadia through a mixture of longing and envy. The envy is not really about Nadia. It is about the distance between Sophia and a part of herself she cannot yet claim. This is why daughters of narcissistic mothers often have such complicated relationships with women who seem free. Because you were not allowed to be free. Your mother needed you to be small, contained, attuned to her rather than to yourself. And so freedom in another woman activates something like longing, grief, maybe rage, that has nothing to do with that woman personally. There is something else here that is less comfortable to discuss. Sometimes the projection is not something longed for, but something feared. You might project your own hunger for attention, your own aggression, your own competitive impulse onto a female friend and then experience her as threatening, as someone who is always trying to take something from you. You watch her carefully at social gatherings, you feel a low-grade anxiety around her, and you cannot explain that. She seems to be performing for the room in a way that bothers you, even though if someone asked you to explain why, you could not. The aggression and competition that got split off from you, because it was not safe to have those feelings in your family system, now lives in that woman. And you watch it there with fear because you weren't taught that those feelings were dangerous. This is the twist in female friendships. What you cannot tolerate in another woman is almost always something you have not yet allowed yourself to own. If that resonates, and I think for many of you it will, please be gentle with yourself. It is what happens when the first woman in your life was both what you needed most and the source of your deepest pain. You did not choose this, you inherited it. Projective identification also shows up in therapy. And I really want to include this section and I want to spend meaningful time here because what happens in therapy is profoundly misunderstood. And I think that misunderstanding keeps people from going or from going back when it gets hard. There's a character in the television series Fleabag. And if you have not seen it, this is both a spoiler and a recommendation. There's the priest, and the way Fleabag falls for him is, I think, the most honest depiction of therapeutic idealization I have ever seen in popular culture. It is not quite therapy, but the dynamic is precise. He's consistent. He is boundaried. He does not need anything from her. He sees her clearly, the charming surface and the grief underneath it, and he does not flinch. And she falls for him intensely, urgently, in a way that she knows on some level is not entirely about him. What she is experiencing, in part, is relational longing in the presence of someone who can actually hold it without collapsing or retaliating. That feeling of, finally, someone who will not leave when I show them what is underneath. That is exactly what happens in real therapy. Therapy stirs this up, especially if you are working with a good therapist who is consistently warm, boundaried, and reliably present. Because those are precisely the conditions under which projective identifications gets activated. The holding environment Bion wrote about, the therapist as container, is almost designed to invite these projections forward so they can be worked with. You may find yourself idolizing your therapists, feeling like they are the only person who really gets you, feeling like the therapeutic relationship is more real than your other relationships, thinking about them between sessions in a way that surprises you sometimes, wanting more from them than the therapeutic frame allows. It means that your therapy is working. Your early relational template is being activated. The longing for the consistent, attuned, non-retaliating mother, and is being placed into the therapeutic relationship where it can actually be seen and named and eventually metabolized. A good therapist does not just passively receive the projection. They use what they notice in themselves. Bion called the therapist's reverie, to understand what the client is communicating that cannot yet be said directly. If a therapist suddenly feels an urge to rescue the client or finds themselves feeling unusually protective or unusually invisible, that is information. The client is communicating something real through a channel that comes before language. Now here's the part that I think is most important and most often left out of the conversation about therapy, the rupture. At some point, if the therapy is doing its job, your therapist will disappoint you. They will say something that doesn't make sense. They will seem less attuned than usual. They will enforce a boundary that feels like rejection. Maybe they go on a holiday and you feel abandoned in a way that seems disproportionate. And here's the twist that we rarely talk about, that moment of rupture that we are not prepared for. That moment of rupture and the repair that follows is possibly the most healing thing that can happen to you in that room, in that therapy. Because for the first time, the following sequence of events unfolds. Something goes wrong, the good does not vanish, the relationship holds, you survive it, and the therapist is still there, still the same person that they were before, still caring, still present, which means the good was never contingent on perfection. That is new information for your nervous system. That is object constancy being built in real time in a real relationship. This is why I tell people, do not quit therapy the first time it gets uncomfortable. The discomfort is often where the work actually lives. There usually is a moment, it's rarely gentle, which we need to talk about. You are in the middle of an argument with someone you love, you have just ended a friendship, or you're sitting in a therapy session describing a pattern for the third time and something shifts. You see yourself briefly from the outside. You notice the architecture of what you have been doing. Let me give you a specific scenario. Imagine a woman, okay, let's call her Clara, who has just ended her third significant relationship in 8 years. Each relationship started with the same incredible intensity. Each man felt uniquely special to her, like no one before. And each relationship ended in the same way, with Clara feeling invisible, misunderstood, and somehow hollowed out. The person she thought she was with turned out to be someone she invented. And sitting with her therapist, she says, he turned out to be someone I invented. And the therapist says, tell me more about what you invented. And Clara starts to describe this man, the man she thought she was falling in love with. And she realizes slowly and with a kind of vertigo that the qualities she is describing are qualities she herself has never believed she possessed. Groundedness, this certainty, right to ask for what you need without flinching. She invented him, but she invented him from herself. That is the twist at the center of all of this. The person you have been so desperately seeking has always been a portrait of the parts of yourself you have not yet been able to inhabit. And that recognition, when it comes, is both grief and the beginning of something new. And that grief is real. You're mourning the version of the story where someone else saves you, fills you, completes you. That is a beautiful story. And it's very hard to let it go. So do not minimize that grief. And underneath the grief is something truly remarkable, because if those qualities, that groundedness, that certainty, that permission, if they came from you, then they were always yours. You did not imagine them out of nothing. You projected what was real. And that means the work is not to find someone to give those things to you. The work is to bring them home. How do we reclaim the projection? The goal, and I want to be clear, this is long-term work, not something that you accomplish in a weekend or after a single video. The goal is to reclaim what you have been projecting, to be able to hold inside yourself the qualities, the worth, lovability that you have been outsourcing to others for years. This does not mean you stop admiring people, of course not. It does not mean that love becomes less intense or less real. It means that your sense of yourself stops being contingent on what you have placed in someone else. You can love someone deeply without needing them to carry the proof of your worth. There's a beautiful moment near the end of Black Swan, before everything falls apart, where Nina finally dances the Black Swan, not as a performance of freedom, but as a genuine experience of it. She has stopped watching herself from outside. She is inside herself for the first time, and you can see it. The quality of her presence changes. She stops trying to be Lily and becomes something that was always latent in herself. That is the image I hold for this work. Not that you become a different person, but that you stop needing to borrow from someone else what was yours all along. Signs you are starting to do this. Well, first of all, you notice the idealization in real time, not only in retrospect, but as it is forming. You feel the pull towards someone, and there's a part of you that can also observe, I'm placing something here. This person is beginning to carry a weight that belongs to me. That noticing alone is significant. It does not immediately change the pattern, but it creates a small distance between you and the automatic response. And that distance is where choice begins to live. The crashes start to feel less catastrophic. When someone disappoints you, you can hold the complexity, the good alongside the disappointment, the love alongside the frustration. The relationship stops being either perfect or ruined. It becomes more dimensional. That is a significant shift. And perhaps most importantly, you start to be able to say things to yourself that used to only feel true when someone else said them first. Like, I'm allowed to want good things. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to be the one who's worthy, not just the one who witnesses someone else's worth. That last shift is, I think, the heart of all this. You have spent a long time giving away your own value, placing it in other people for safekeeping because it did not feel safe inside you. This work is about bringing it home. Projective identification is not a flaw in your character. It is your adaptation system, creative, deeply human adaptation. It was the best way your psyche could find to stay connected to the things you needed and were not given, to keep hope alive in a form you could reach. The work is not to become someone who feels things less, no. The work is not to stop being someone who loves powerfully or who sees something luminous in another person. Those are gifts. The work is to let those things happen from a more stable place inside yourself. To not have to borrow your sense of worth from someone else because yours is already there, available to you. It's just waiting. The people who seem to have what you have always longed for, look at them more closely. What you see in them is not foreign to you. It is a part of yourself that learned very early that it was not safe to be known. It is safe now. Not all at once, of course, but the door is open for you. If you have questions or there are specific dynamics you would like me to go into, leave them in the comments. I do read them and they shape where we go next. The first projective identification video is linked here. If any of this was new to you, that one gives you the theoretical foundation that this video builds on. Please take care of yourselves and I will see you next time. Have a great day.